Welcome into another edition of Region Roundup. I'm James Boyd here with Mike Clark. And I have to say, fair warning, this is my last Region Roundup podcast. For those of you who don't know, I received a promotion to go cover the Illini, my alma mater. So I'll be moving down to the Champaign-Urbana area within like the next 3 weeks or so. It's been a fun ride. I'll get more into that towards the end of this podcast. But I want to share that. You won't hear my voice, my beautiful, Emmy Oscar-worthy, voice here. But as I always ask, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and it's actually interesting because the timing of this is kind of, curious, ironic, whatever. Today is the 2-year anniversary of my coming back to the Times, the most recent time. Those of you who may have been reading the Times for a while know that I have been here. I've left, I've come back a few times, actually 4 times to be precise. This is my 4th stint at the Times, which is something that, I never really expected that to happen, the going away and coming back so many times. But so I'll be in a little bit of a reflective mood probably here too, but we will get to that. We'll get to the reflective part of it later. And before we do that, we have a lot of news to talk about. So for those who may not be aware, 2 of the best high school softball teams in the entire country are like 3 or 4 miles apart. And they're right here in Northwest Indiana, which is kind of crazy. It's not the first time that something like this has happened. I think I don't know if I talked with you about this, but back in the, must have been in the 90s, I guess, EC Central and Lake Central.
We did talk about this, yes.
Yeah, were 2 of the top girls basketball teams in the country. So that was kind of cool. But now we got 2 of the top softball teams in the country, and you were there for their 2nd meeting of the year and probably not their last.
Yeah, so Lake Central won the first matchup 4-2 at home, and this time Crown Point got a bit of revenge and won 5-0. I think the coolest thing about the game, Mike, was, one, deadline purposes. I love going to like very high-level softball games because they're very quick. Not many mistakes, and usually both teams have good pitchers and good clean play. And honestly, the running joke that I have with the coaching staff at Crown Point and Lake Central is like it's almost like a college game. There's so many college recruits and a lot of Division I college recruits on both teams that a hard hit ground ball is going to get turned over for a put out pretty much every single time. So it's a very clean game, and I think. The biggest thing that stood out to me yesterday was that Crown Point went with Grace Luca, a senior pitcher. In the plan originally, Mike, it's in my story, was for her to go through like one, cycle of the lineup. That was what the head coach Angie Richwalski told me. And she was going to put in Maddie Ellish, who's the Arizona commit, younger sister of Miranda Ellish, yada yada yada. And she said that Grace was going so well that she figured. I probably shouldn't take her out, because she hasn't given up any runs. And as it turns out, she pitched a complete game shutout, only gave up 2 hits and 2 walks to a very talented Lake Central team. And they basically just got back even with them. At this point, with the way the conference's schedule is set up, barring any incredible upsets, they'll both end as DSC co-champs. And like you said, this is their 2nd meeting. They could meet again in the regional if they're both able to, win their sectionals, which they are favored to win. Nothing's guaranteed, obviously, come postseason, but just keep that in mind that it could be a trilogy. But it was a really fun game. I mean, Maddie Ellish hit, 2 home runs, and when your pitcher doesn't have to pitch, your ace pitcher, doesn't pitch and still hits 2 home runs and a double, and I'm like, wow, that's a pretty good athlete. That's kind of why she's going to Arizona. So it was a great game. I asked Jeff Sherman afterwards, Lake Central coach, I was like, is it almost a good thing to get your first loss of the year? Just get it out the way. I don't know if, you want to go, obviously you want to win every game, but I feel like it's almost better to, lose and feel human while you still can before the season's over. And he was like, bump that. I want to win. So I was like, okay, coach, like, I agree with you. But he was saying, like, it'll be good to see how his team responds because they haven't had to respond to a loss all year. I mean, they're 19-1 for crying out loud, so they're certainly not having a bad year. Like he told me yesterday, it's not a blemish on their season. And he also pointed out that it's really hard to go undefeated in baseball and softball. I would say it's harder to go undefeated in those sports as opposed to basketball and football. Obviously, football's a lot shorter schedule. And in basketball, you can pretty much pencil a kid in for like 20 points, 25 points a night, but you can't pencil in a kid for, a home run every other game. It just doesn't work that way. And then also you can't play your best pitcher every game. In basketball and football, you play your best players every single game. So I do think the outcome could have been different if Lake Central had gone with Peyton Pepkowski, who's a Loyola recruit. She's their ace. She is phenomenal, in my opinion, probably or arguably the best pitcher in the region this year. So that's something to look forward to if they meet again and come June. I believe that both of them will have their aces. I believe Grace did a great job and certainly earned consideration, I guess, if that meeting were to happen again. But it would be hard for me to picture them not starting Maddie Ellish and then Lake Central not starting Peyton Pepkowski and letting the chips fall where they may. But it was a great game, clean game. And like you said, two teams nationally ranked. And it's funny that you brought that up because I actually talked to people in the press box yesterday. I was like, hey, I remember my editor, and I was like, he told me that, this is kind of how it was with, Lake Central girls basketball and EC Central girls basketball. And they were telling me like, oh yeah, like it was, standing room only for those games. So it's kind of crazy that you have two really, really talented softball teams that will not meet, at the semi-state or state level, but they'll be duking it out, most likely for a chance to get to that round. So it was crazy. And when I was there, people were asking me like, oh, I didn't expect to see you here. And I told them, hey, don't run me off too soon. I got one softball game left in me. So there you go.
Yeah, and you think about the girls' basketball situation, they were in the same sectional, so I think one of those nationally ranked teams didn't get out of the sectional because that's the geography of it. So because they were both obviously big schools. So that was, but yeah, it's cool to see that coming around again. So the other thing that's going on right now is the 4 schools in Hammond. The era of that for public schools, that is coming to a close with the spring season. And what that means is the athletic directors at the 2 schools going forward, Hammond Central and Morton, are Sean Kinsey at Morton and Chris Moore at Hammond Central are putting together their staffs. And some of them were no surprise, which we'll get to. And I don't know that any of them were necessarily surprises, but there was one hire that was just, so obvious that there was just not going to be any doubt about it. So, but yeah, so those are starting to come to fruition now. I don't know that we have all of them yet. I'm not sure that they've named all the spring coaches yet, but we're pretty much set for the fall and winter. So, one of the other things too, I want to mention this before I let you, before I turn it over to you here, but Larry Moore Sr. Is retiring as athletic director at Hammond High, and it's a very. I actually am going to try to reach out to him, and talk to him about his years because. We talked about this in the pod before. He was a star, high school star, senior all-star teammate of Larry Bird. He coached very successfully at St. Francis de Sales, which is, basically right across the state line in the East Side neighborhood. And then he coached at Clark, and he coached at Hammond High himself before turning it over to his son, Larry Moore Jr., who's had a remarkable run. And is going to have another remarkable run. I'm going to go on the record and say it at Hammond Central. But Larry Moore Jr. So is one of the hires, and there are a few more that you were have been writing about here.
Yeah, so I definitely want to throw this out there really quick, and this is a story that I'll be having coming later today. Talked to Larry Moore this morning about him being officially named the Hammond Central coach. I guess they announced all their coaches at Tuesday's board meeting, but somehow I guess, lost in, transit. I only got a couple of them. Obviously, Larry Moore Jr. would have been my headliner, but I'll have more on that. But ironically, it's funny you bring that up, Mike, about his father. His father's actually going to be the assistant AD at Hammond Central.
Oh, you really? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Okay.
Yeah. So he'll be continuing to work with his son, and kind of starting this new era in Hammond. So I'm really excited about that. And obviously, you can still talk to him about his time at Hammond. And all I ask is, if you talk to him, you ask him if he ever gave, Larry Bird some buckets. Okay. That's all I need to know. I mean, I'm not comparing careers. Obviously, Larry legend. But I just want to know if Larry's human. I hear a lot about this Larry guy. I was not born yet. So I'd like to think that somebody else, had a little game too to make that Indiana All-Star team. So,
right.
On a more serious note, like I said, Larry Moore's going to be pegged as the boys basketball coach for Hammond Central. The girls basketball coach will actually be Keisha Howard, who's coming over. I believe it might have been from Gavitt, and then she's coming over from Gavitt. I'm sorry, she's coming over from Clark. And then the Morton girls basketball coach is Alana Anderson. She's coming over from Gavitt. And then the Morton boys basketball coach is Aaron Abram, who was on Larry Moore Jr.'s staff at Hammond. And then obviously the big one that I wanted to get out there, which I did get out there, was Adam Hudak being the first football coach at Hammond Central. He comes over from Wheeler. He's a region guy, 1998 graduate of Lowell. So he's well known in these parts. Had a pretty good turnaround at Wheeler, helping them get their first winning season last fall since, I think, 2015. So he's a proven coach, and he's excited. I mean, all of them are excited. The theme I'm hearing is that, obviously you're excited to be the first at anything, but they're also mentioning how they're like on an even playing field when it comes to like facilities and things like that, and just having the proper things that you need to have a high-level program. So I think now, when you look at Hammond Central and the things they're going to have, they'll be able to look more like more on the levels like some of these DAC schools and nice NCC schools that have the really nice fields and, really nice courts and things like that, practice facilities and things that, frankly speaking, that weren't really there, in some of these Hammond schools. So while it is kind of sad to see some of these schools close down, it's also exciting to see kind of this new energy swirling around Hammond Central. I've seen some things on Facebook, people saying I'm still going to call them the Wildcats. So it's a passionate group over there, but those are some of the big name hires. Like you said, they've hired most of their coaches, and actually Mike just texted me during this podcast. Thank you, Mike. Very clutch. I forgot. Mac Mishler is the Morton football coach. Sorry, I forgot that too. He was another one that was kind of a given. But yeah, those are all the, I guess, big name coaches. They've named a lot of the fall coaches too. I won't get into all of those because I'll be naming names forever. But those are the main coaches. I'll have more on that later today. Like I said, because I really didn't know that all of them had been announced. It was kind of weird how everything got rolled out. But I have the info now. Story coming later. But yeah, that's a really big news in the region, and obviously I'll be helping my guy John Harrell out by getting these names out on Twitter as well.
Okay, and one of your other stories this week, among the many stories this week, we talked about Riley Johnston and the Johnston pole vault family tree quite a bit. You've written about it quite a bit, and Riley picked a school, and I don't know. I mean, jokingly, I'll say it's a little bit of a surprise. I don't know, given his family history. So
yeah, I would definitely say it probably is. So for those of you who don't know, Riley Johnston is the grandson of Jim Johnston Sr., son of Jim Johnston Jr. Both were standout Hobart pole vaulters. Went on to compete at Purdue and win Big Ten championships. His grandfather actually won a national championship. And in 1958, in pole vaulting. So it's quite a big deal in their family, and they're Boilermakers through and through. And then Riley goes and picks IU. So I asked him, I was like, how's your family reacting to this? And I have a quote in my story about his grandpa, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was basically saying like, if my grandpa was here, I'd be getting an earful about not being a Boilermaker. But I think he'd be proud of me. And he kind of laughed it off. But he basically just said like, while he's proud to carry on his family tradition as like another, collegiate pole vaulter. He kind of just wants to write his own chapter, go somewhere where he's kind of, I guess not as well known. But either way, they were happy for him. I asked him, if you're going to get your dad in some Boilermaker gear, and he was like, man, it might be tough, but he actually sent me a photo afterwards, after he signed, where him and his mom and his dad were all wearing Hoosiers gear. So I guess love trumps, whatever college you went to. But yeah, I mean, it was quite a big deal. The biggest thing he's focusing on now that he's made his college decision is trying to be a state champion like his grandfather was. I mean, the only thing about it is Riley's working his way back from a torn hamstring. So, he's taking it very, very slow. But he finished third 2 years ago as a sophomore at the state meet. And then, in football, as a starting quarterback, he was the state runner-up this past year in Class 4A with Hobart. So he was just telling me, when you get so close to being the best in the state and being able to say you're number one, he's like, it kind of eats at you when you don't get it. So he knows this is his last chance to get a chance to stand atop the podium. So he's going to go for it, and hopefully he has the health to at least give it his best shot. Obviously nothing's guaranteed. I'm sure the other kids working just as hard and are, just as deserving. But all I ask is that hopefully, he'll be healthy enough to give it a go. So that was a fun story just because, my last week here, and I've written so many stories about Riley, and he kind of hit me up. He's like, hey, man, I know you're leaving soon, but can you do a story for me? And that was pretty humbling, You get somebody to ask you to do a story about him. And he actually talked to me before he made it a public announcement, which, all journalists usually appreciate. You can write it early, get it nice and squared away and set up. And, it was pretty cool just having it, being pre-timed. And as soon as he signs, we just press send and it goes out to the world. So I appreciate that, Riley. You're always good about helping me with my deadline. So hopefully that continues, in my next endeavors with the Illini.
Right. And so there's a lot of stuff going on right now. I know some people kind of feel like, okay, well, football's not going on, basketball's not going on, so the spring is not as much going on. Well, that's not true. Just what we just covered here shows that this has been a really packed week for you, and it's not even over yet. It's been kind of a busy week for me too, and one of the interesting things that I got to go out and see yesterday, we were recording this on Thursday, so it was Wednesday, the Railcats opened spring training. And why that's a big deal is the Railcats didn't have spring training last year. The Railcats opted out of the 2020 season in the American Association because of the pandemic. The American Association has 12 teams. Actually, it's not the same 12 teams this year as last year. We don't need to get into that. But they had 12 teams last year also. 6 of them played a shortened schedule. But this year, we're back to 12 teams, 100-game schedule. There's a couple of things going on. One of them is I know there's been some high school baseball played out at the Steel Yard, the usual games that we've had. And for anybody who hasn't been out there yet, or maybe was waiting for the Railcats to start, you're going to be surprised when you see the place because starting on March 1st, basically they did a total renovation of the park, and so there was a brand new playing surface put in with the assistance of Roger Bossard, who is the longtime groundskeeper of the White Sox, probably the most famous and the best groundskeeper in the entire world. Actually, he's put in fields in Saudi Arabia, all over the United States and Canada. He's kind of a local guy too. He grew up in South Holland, and I've talked to him a few times over the years. Just a super genuinely nice guy, and also again really, really good at what he does, which is making grass look great on baseball fields. So there's a new field. They also moved the fences in 18 feet in right center because they decided to put the bullpens back there. The bullpens had been in foul territory behind first and third base. It's kind of like the configuration at Wrigley Field before the Cubs also changed their configuration. So basically, it was a safety issue, among other things. I was talking to Brian Leiter, the president of the Railcats, there have been some safety concerns over the years about having the bullpens on the field in the field of play. Basically, you have to have, for folks who've been to baseball games, you have to have what they call protectors, which is somebody who will stand behind the catcher in the bullpen just to make sure that, foul balls or thrown balls coming in that direction don't hit anybody. But anyway, it was just a safety thing mainly. And now, we have fences that are a lot closer in right center. And there's also a funky little corner down in the right field corner now, because the fence, the original right field corner is there, and then the fence goes about 30 feet, and then it angles straight back into the playing field. So there's like a little pocket back there, and it's going to be interesting to see how Carams play off the right field corner there. But also, not just that, but they've also ripped out the old playground area behind the center field scoreboard. There's going to be a brand new one there. Kids will be able to take batting practice there too. Basically, from little kids can hit against very slow speeds. Middle school, high school kids can hit against faster speeds. There's going to be a new concession area back there as well. They also took out seats down the right field line and turned that into a second berm. There's been a berm in right center since the park was there, and now there's a second berm also. They put a new bar in behind home plate, and they've painted everything. The ballpark is coming up on 20 years old, and it looks great. I would encourage anybody who's interested, in baseball or just a good time, just head out there. For sure this summer the Railcats will have 50 home games. Also a couple of exhibitions actually that are coming up starting on Saturday. But it's going to be fun to see what the new ballpark looks like. It's just going to be fun to have baseball back after a 2-year absence. The team is going to look a little bit different. Actually, it's going to look a lot different because of the fact that they didn't play last year. Some of the players have moved on to other teams. Some are retired. That's just the nature of the game. I mean, it's a kind of a minor league baseball, especially independent minor league baseball, is kind of a transitory thing anyway. And there are actually 2 players who were at spring training yesterday who were at spring training in 2019 on opening day. Trevor Lubking, who's going to be their ace pitcher, is one of them. He was with the team all of 2019. And then Zach Wells is an outfielder who made the team as a non-roster player in 2019, and he is back. But that's it. There are a few other players who saw time at various time during this 2019 season, but they weren't around for the entire season. So anyway, James, as you know, baseball is very near and dear to my heart, so it's great to see this back. The Oilmen are also gearing up to play as well. They just named a manager, TJ Merrick. They've been rolling out some of their roster lately too, so we're going to have the Oilmen actually did play last summer, so we're going to have the Oilmen and the Railcats back this summer. And you need to come back and see a game sometime, so you don't even have to write about it. So
that's the part that people don't realize. Like we as journalists, we don't get paid to just go to games and go home. So it'll be nice to go to game and go home right after. But yeah, I had a lot of good times with the Railcats, going out to talk to coach, talk to manager Greg Taggart, and him, going on a soliloquy for 10 minutes after one question. He's awesome. I think he's the perfect guy for that type of thing. And like you said, because it's so transitive and players coming and going, there's always a unique story about how some player ended up there, or if they have a little success, there's this background where you're like, man, they could have been overseas, one of them could have been overseas, another one could have been working in like a factory somewhere, and it's like, wow, you're here today all together. So it's always a unique situation as a story writer and as a storyteller you can appreciate. And in that same breath, I do want to mention that while the Railcats will be starting up, like we talked about a little bit earlier, the school city of Hammond is getting ready to consolidate, and as a way to kind of commemorate the four current public high schools in Hammond, which is Hammond High, Gavitt, Clark, and Morton. They're having a I guess all Hammond tournament this Saturday. It'll be at Dowling Park. It's called The Last Inning. First game is going to be Clark and Gavitt at 10 a.m. Second game will be Morton and Hammond at 12 p.m. at noon. And then they'll have a consolation game for the losers of the first two games, and they have a championship game for the winner of the first two games. So, if you have a chance to go out and you want to just get out and get some fresh air and see some high school baseball, go check that out, just because this will be the last time something like this happens for those schools. And, these are, I'm sure there will be a lot of just faithful, Hammond graduates there, excited to just see their school compete against each other, probably for the last time, some of them, to see them play against each other. So I think it's really cool that they did this. This was not something that, was set in stone when the consolidation was announced. This is something they came up with. And they kind of dubbed it The Last Inning after MJ's The Last Dance last summer that we were all watching at this point in time because we weren't going anywhere. So I'm glad that a year later we can go somewhere and see some kids play the sports they love. And like you said, you love baseball. I don't really love baseball, but I love the kids that play baseball. So there's my compromise. It should be fun for a lot of people involved. And I tell myself, like, oh, man, I don't really like softball, I don't like baseball. But then I go, it's like a game like yesterday between Crown Point and Lake Central softball, and I'm, like, glued to every play. And, I'm wondering, like, how this kid reacts and things like that. So it's fun. I think you just have to appreciate the fact that, these kids are still playing and still committed to their programs. I mean, how many kids do you know would just not play, if they knew it was the last season and they're not a senior? But the fact that they came out in the same way it was in football and basketball, they're coming and playing during a pandemic, no less, knowing it's their last season and still giving it their best effort, which I think is commendable.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us into your column about a couple of West Side athletes who have a pretty compelling story.
Yeah, so this was a unique column just because it was, man, Mike, this was eating at me a while. So for those of you who don't know, I wrote about Perion and Paris Roberson, the two twins, fraternal twins on West Side's team. They helped West Side get to the semi-state game, win their first regional sectional in 16 years, yada, yada, yada. But the first time I wrote about them was more so about how they have really differing personalities that kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that they don't look alike at all. They don't look related at all. One's tall, one's short, one's lighter, one's darker. One wears goggles when he plays, the other one doesn't. So, they don't really have anything in common besides their last name. So, all that being said, the first story I did on them did not really focus on what drives them. And I remember this day distinctly. It was March 9th because I went to 3 different high schools that day. I went to Hammond. This was the leading up to the regional, and me being me, we probably could have, handed off a story to a stringer or something, but I was like, you know what? I want them all. So I think we had 6 teams advance to the regional round, so I had 6 stories to do about sectional winners, and I figured that one day, since Hammond, West Side, and Bowman are all pretty close together, I would just, hit them all up. So I went to Hammond first, then went to West Side, and I was running late to go to Bowman. And so I got done with my West Side interview, doing, talking to Perion and Paris, and had already, honed in on the whole twin angle. And it took me some time after that to realize that that wasn't really the story. The story is about how both of them lost their dad pretty young in 8th grade, and then their grandma in 8th grade. Their dad died from kidney failure. Their grandma died from ovarian cancer, and those were 2 pillars in their lives. At the time, I didn't know, about that at all. I just remember, wrapping up my interview, heading out the door, and joking with them, like, hey man, why you guys play so hard? Like, what? Do you ever take a break? Do you ever just relax? And and Perion told me, well, man, we just play for our mom and our dad. A lot of kids play for their parents or their loved ones or somebody, and I just thought, okay, cool, that's unique. But the way I shaped the article was a better journalist would have stopped and asked why. That's always the question you ask, And again, I was rushing, and it still wasn't a bad story, the first one. It just wasn't the story. So that was bothering me a lot. And after Perion committed to Purdue Northwest, that's when I kind of reapproached him and asked him about his grandma and his mom. His grandma and his dad. as well as his mom, who's still alive. She's holding it down for him and his brother. And yeah, long story short, I didn't know about their dad and their grandma until after the season was over. They posted some stuff on Facebook talking about how they really wish they would have won a state championship for them. And, if you were still here, what would you think? That sort of thing. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, and it clicked in my brain, like, that's why they said that. That's why Perion said, like, oh, they're no longer here. So having a pretty good relationship with them already, I reached out to Perion after he committed to Purdue Northwest, asked him if he wanted to do a story about it. I asked him if he wanted to talk about, I guess playing for, his Angels. And he was, more than willing to. And I also talked to Paris about it as well. And I think they really appreciated the chance to vent, basically. We talked about it a lot, Mike, when we do these type of stories. It's always their choice to share, and some people don't want to share those things. But considering that it has, again, this happened in 8th grade. It's been about 4 or 5 years since then. They've had some time to grow and deal with it and kind of process it. It's not that fresh, even though to them it still feels like it just happened. I think that, having matured allowed them to kind of talk to me, from a sense of appreciation rather than like grief, if that makes sense. So, check the story out. I enjoyed it. I think it was one that, to me, was about as real as it can get when it comes to just giving you, I guess, the insight as to how my brain processed the first story and how I, to me, messed up. Like, I really felt bad not getting that into the story. But, you learn, and hopefully I'm a better journalist now than I was back then, and I'll ask why going forward. But it was a unique story about those two. And after reading that, I think you'll understand, those of you who have seen them play, why they play so hard. It's because they were, this particular season, they knew it was their last chance to get that state championship, and they were right there. And, they were two, vital parts of this team. Sure, they had Jalen Washington, who's, the top recruit, and Kamari Peterson, who's the player of the year, but those two players alone don't, get that team to where they were. It was a very collective effort by Westside, and the Roberson twins did their part and then some. So, those, I don't like to write columns very often, but I feel like when I'm compelled to, usually, hopefully, it makes somebody else feel something.
Oh, well, it does. I guess actually, so this is what was teased up at the top of the podcast. This is the time to reflect a little bit, and it's kind of a good lead-in because I know I've pushed you to do columns. I know that. Just to run down the timeline a little bit here to give folks a little bit of perspective. So I started back at the Times 2 years ago today as the night editor. A couple of months after that, I became the sports editor and began working with you on a more formal and organized basis, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then that lasted until last October when we reorganized some things at the paper. I was assigned to cover Illinois news and sports, kind of restart that coverage, which the paper had kind of gotten away from around 5 years ago, and they decided they wanted to get back into covering Illinois news and sports again. I had a little bit of institutional knowledge there, so that was my assignment. We still kind of work together a little bit, I guess, on the sports side. Aaron Ferguson is now the deputy sports editor, and he is in charge of sports. But during the time that I was directly your boss, I know that I was pushing you to do more columns because I think you have a pretty unique perspective and a pretty unique voice, and it has been a ride. And just going back to what you're saying about the Roberson twins, in terms of, sometimes the story does get away from us. That's just journalism is kind of is not an exact science. Getting a little bit insider here, I guess. The way we operate. We're always looking for stories. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're seeking out every single day. And you never know where stories are going to come up, and you never know how you're going to find out about stories. Like you said, that was kind of like an offhand remark, by one of the Roberson twins, at the end of an interview about something else. And that's kind of the way the spark works. That's one of the reasons that you mentioned, that you want to get out to the schools, and we've had this discussion as well. I said, James, you got to do some of this over the phone. And you'd say, Mike, but I got to go out there, So we'd go back and forth on that in a good-natured way. But, and I'm trying to save you some time, and you're trying to get better stories. And we know we're all kind of pulling in the same direction, but it's one of the things that we kind of butt our heads up against, on a regular basis. There's so many stories and so little time, and that's kind of what it comes down to. It's like, I'm sure, it's going to be tough for you to leave, because I'm sure you're going to feel like, wow, I wish I'd gotten to that story, and I mean, I'm kind of like that right now. It's like I have stories on my list, that I really want to do. Haven't had time to get to them yet, and I feel bad for sources sometimes, because, sources reach out and say, here's something that's going on, you might be interested in it. I would be interested in it. I am interested in it, and then, a few days go by, a week goes by, maybe 2 weeks, it's like I haven't done it yet. And the source is like, I just want to make sure, they'll check in, on, are you still interested? I'm interested. It's not a question of lack of interest. It's a question of lack of time. So, so this is kind of the, and this is kind of a general thing, it's not unique to either one of us, obviously, but, kind of where I was going with this ramble here was that, it's been great working with you, because your passion for finding stories and telling those stories is remarkable. And the fact that, you came to the region, 3 years ago, with really not much of a background in Indiana sports, Indiana high school sports, the region or anything, and you just immersed yourself in it. And you've gotten to the point where, again, you got people calling you with story tips all the time, Facebook messaging you, texting you, whatever, Twitter DMing you, and it's a testament to what your effort is, what effort you put in, it's like people recognize that. People in the region appreciate hard work. They appreciate passion for your job, and they see that in you. And, we are going to miss you, something fierce, but we are so happy for you, in that you're moving forward in your career. I'm glad personally that you're staying, within Lee Enterprises. Again, as you mentioned, this is, not leaving the company or anything like that. This is going to cover Illini sports for Illinois newspapers. So I'm thrilled to see what is going to happen next for you. And I certainly hope you won't be a stranger.
No, not at all. Mike, we'll still, correspond on Twitter frequently, very frequently. But, all I can say is that it's been such a crazy, fun ride. I can think of crazy experiences. I've hopped the fence at Crown Point trying to get out after, writing a story. And if anybody knows, like, the fence at Crown Point for softball and baseball is tall. So I had to go back to my youth to get over that thing. There was a time I went out to Benton Central to cover an Andrean playoff game for football. Then, Benton Central's in like the middle of nowhere. So I had to drive to like 20 minutes to get to the nearest McDonald's and turn the story in, and follow the story in like 15 minutes. And, people are asking me, hey, do you want something to drink? No, I want to get my story done. It's those are the experiences I'm looking back. It's like, man, I went to, even this past year, I covered Maryville football at Elkhart, and it was freezing cold. And, imagine trying to, pound a story out in 20 minutes when your hands are, ice cubes. So I wouldn't trade it for anything, though, just because I think the toughness of it makes you a better writer. And then overall, being a kid coming out of college, and then still being a kid now, I guess an older, wiser kid, you learn and so much from people you encounter. And like I've said many times before, I'm inspired by the kids that we've covered, just because you don't realize what they're dealing with sometimes on a daily basis, and what they're going through. And I've had the chance to tell some of those stories, and I couldn't tell them all, which is, I guess the bittersweet part about it. It's like, man, like, if I could be in two places at once, I would. If I could split myself in two and cover two beats, I would. If I could tell every story ever, I probably would. But it's just not how it goes. So I did. I sincerely did my best, and I think that shows in the work. And whether that was driving all the time, or I got 79,000 miles in my car, and I bought it brand new before I got this job. So a lot of miles put in the car. State trips and going to. I was out in Wheatfield, last weekend for Kankakee Valley, which is, on a Friday, leaving my house. I kid you not, left my house at 2:37, and I didn't get to Kankakee Valley until 5:02. When the game started exactly at 5, and I was lucky that they had some announcements that I didn't have to miss any of the pitches. But I was thinking, I thought to myself, Mike, seriously, I thought, okay, it's not going to take more than 2 hours. And, Friday in traffic said, you thought wrong, James. So, those are the times people are like, man, why did you do this? How could you do this? But I guess in the end, I never, envisioned myself being in the region forever, as far as being like the 20-year region reporter. Even with my new job, I don't picture myself being there for, 10, 12, 20 years. But at the same time, I also know that while I'm there and while I'm in these moments, you got to just enjoy it. So, I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I smiled, a lot. And even with the mask on this past year, I'm sure if people could see me underneath the mask, it was pretty positive for me. I mean, after a while, you get used to some of that deadline pressure early on. It scared the life out of me to keep stats and have to write and tweet and all that. And now it's like riding a bike. So I'm looking forward to some new challenges. I'm looking forward to being uncomfortable. And as my grandma and my mom say, the only way you grow is to try something new and get uncomfortable. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm familiar with, the Illini. Like I said, I went to school there, so it's not like a completely unfamiliar place. But at the same time, it's a new challenge. It's going to be a lot more Zoom calls and a lot of people on the beat, a lot more eyes on the beat. So I have to work hard to, create my own type of, flavor to that beat. But there's one thing I know 100%, and that's that I wouldn't be in this position had I not, been here at the Times for the last 2.5 years. I mean, oh man, it was so much fun. I mean, being the young reporter too, getting stopped at games because people think I'm a student, and people telling me like, hey, my son wants to go into journalism. Hey, can you give him some tips, or can you, even now, even though I'm leaving, I've had a few teachers who read my stuff saying like, hey, when you get settled, can you, do a Zoom call with my class, or something like that. So. I'm all for it. If anybody in the region ever needs anything or wants, my insight, whatever advice I can offer, feel free to hit me up. All my social media is open. And to all the kids that I covered, all the athletes that I wrote about, coaches, parents, I appreciate the support more than you know. And I think more than anything, I just wanted these athletes to know that they mean something, that whether you're, a Division I athlete or just an athlete like I was that played in high school and that was it, you matter. Your dreams matter. Whatever you want to do in life, you can do it. Just stay committed, stay positive, and enjoy the ride. And take a lot of pictures, because I wish I took more. Not like in a conceited way, but just in a way like, dang, I went to so many places and I don't have pictures of all those places and all things you did. Because you think in the moment you're trying to get things done, but then looking back now, I'm like, dang, there's a lot of great memories. I could go on and on. I have a column coming about it. I've been kind of putting it off because I'm just like, where do I even start? But I promise by the end of the weekend, I'll have something to put out there that's coherent, with my time here. So thank you all so much.
James, I got to say, I'm going to miss the Friday Night Hype videos after all this.
You know what? That is so funny. I'll have to continue those. When I get on the Illini beat, I'll have to continue those for sure. And just my reflection videos as well, because those are, and that's again another thing that I forgot I even did. I mean, it was fun to do it, and just to let people know that it's pretty cool to get paid to go to games.
Well, we've joked about it, but this is how I knew Friday night was over. You know, when we were winding down a little bit, when when the story was filed, and we have James sitting in his car because a lot of his football game stories were filed from his car. And we get that little wrap up, and kind of the adrenaline rush being over of deadline and everything like that. It was fun. I'd usually still be in the office, wrapping some things up. And it's like, okay, that's kind of the signal to go home because we're done. We're done for the night. It's another football Friday is in the books. Let's move on. But so what I would say, what I'll say, just a quick programming note, real quickly. Aaron Ferguson and I are going to carry on Region Roundup as you and I carried on Region Roundup after Robbie Weinstein left. You guys were doing it, and we think it's an important thing to continue. Maybe, who knows, maybe we can have you back as a special guest sometime. But, again, we wish the best in your endeavors. We're going to take, I think that I've been in this business a long time. We've talked about this a little bit too. 41 years as a full-timer, which just boggles my mind to say that number because it honestly doesn't feel like that. 41 years out of context sounds like a really, really long time. And I don't feel like, I've been doing it for that long because I feel like I still got stuff to learn. And I feel like, the way I'm going to wrap this up here right now is that, I've worked with a lot of really good people here at the Times. Some of them a lot of them have gone on to major metro jobs elsewhere. I feel like they've all been able to teach me something too, because, working with good people is, I would imagine you would agree with, some of that stuff rubs off. You see good habits, you see good practices, and you say, okay, well, that's kind of an interesting way of looking at things. And that's one of the things that's been really, really rewarding about working here with you and, again, with so many other people. We have a lot of people who are really committed to telling good stories, and that is what it is all about. Because, at the end of the day, I've seen a ton of baseball games, basketball games, football games, track meets, so on and so forth, and I mean, and writing a basic story about a game is not something that really interests me anymore. I want to find out what is the story there, and just way up at the top of this podcast, you mentioned about that little story that Andy Richwelski was telling you about how Grace was going to just go once through the lineup and then, Grace is pitching pretty well. Why not leave her in? And that's the kind of stuff, that informs our readers, and really takes the story to another level. I mean, you could have just written, the stats, Grace allowed 2 hits and struck out however many, walked however many, but that's not really the story.
Right.
The story is about how she pitched so well, she basically forced her coach to leave her in. So, and and that's the kind of stuff, again, that we specialize in. We tell a lot of good stories we have over the last 3 years. You're going to tell a lot more on the Illini beat. We'll still be here telling region stories, and that's about all I can say. Thanks to everybody for listening. As always, we will be back. I'll be back. Anyway.
I'll be listening. There you go.
Please get vaccinated. We're so close. We're making so much progress. Obviously, fans back watching the Bulls and the Blackhawks in person. It's great to see things opening up again. And that's all I have. But it's been a great ride. James, thanks for everything. And, again, wish you the best of luck.